The Commonwealth has accused Karen Read of striking her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe, with her car after a night of drinking and leaving him in the snow to die. The defense is saying, as they said in their opening statement, that Karen Read was framed and this is all a cover-up. We are at the morning break that we are zooming through of trial day 30. It is Monday, June 24th. And witness Dr. Wolf is on the stand. He's one of two ARCA accident reconstruction witnesses that were hired by the Department of Justice into the investigation into this case. His conclusions through awesome testing, in his own words, because he did in fact create a cannon to shoot whiskey glasses at a stationary taillight, and did determine that the force of a glass hitting the taillight could replicate the damage to Karen Read's vehicle. There was quite a lot of questioning from Alan Jackson about whether the glass being held by a hand hitting a car that was backing up would do the same thing. And he said that that was inconsistent with the damage that you would see to then the arm, but that the glass hitting the vehicle at speed did replicate the damage. A replica human head hitting the Lexus, hitting it at 15 miles an hour, caused significantly more damage than what was seen on Karen Read's vehicle. And it was his opinion that the damage to Karen Read's vehicle is inconsistent with hitting either a head or an arm at 15 miles an hour or above. Of course, the Commonwealth's theory is that Karen Read hit John O'Keefe at over 24 miles an hour. And it was interesting hearing this expert talk about how much damage you would expect to the car, the damage to not just the taillight that's on the outside of the vehicle, but also within the tailgate and elsewhere, and crumpling to that vehicle based on their own testing, where they actually did hit a vehicle with different things to test it. So I think very interesting testimony. We're going to get into that cross-examination now to see what happens on cross. But the testimony is that the damage to Karen Read's vehicle is inconsistent with it hitting a person. As we continue into cross, I don't know where Lally's going to go with that, because this witness is eminently well qualified. And Lally has been going after very likable witnesses. These witnesses have all been way more neutral on cross than a lot of the Commonwealth's witnesses. Some of the Commonwealth witnesses came out just snapping at Jackson on cross-examination. These witnesses have been incredibly neutral on cross, and Lally is the one who was bringing the sass factor over the top with them in a way that sometimes is, to me, seems incredibly rude. At the lunch break on day 30, the defense has rested, the Commonwealth has no rebuttal, and the court has told the jurors, we are now done with evidence. So the evidence in this case is closed. The jurors are dismissed for the day. The court is giving the attorneys 2 hours for closing tomorrow total. So 1 hour for the prosecution, 1 hour for the defense. That means when court starts promptly tomorrow morning, this jury is going to get closing arguments, jury instructions, and then they're going to get to deliberate. So I think it is very likely that we will see a verdict at some point tomorrow. So again, don't forget to download the Law and Order app so I can let you know when we had a verdict. But I think we're on verdict watch for a brief amount of time tomorrow. Let's summarize what happened today. Today we had the last three of the defense witnesses, their medical examiner, and then the two witnesses that were hired by the Department of Justice, or as the jurors know, other agency. And they work with ARCA. They are the two accident reconstruction experts. I thought they were fantastic. The retired medical examiner for Riverside County, California, testified that this injury to the victim was not consistent with a vehicle collision, that the injuries to the arm did seem like animal wounds to the victim's arm, that the injury to the victim's head would have caused him to be unconscious and not mobile, and that he talked about the fact that in vehicle collisions, you would see much more bruising, and there's no bruising anywhere. That bruising, the number one and first thing you're going to look for is bruising. There's no bruising to the arm. There's no injury to the leg. There's no bruising to the chest or torso. And so it's just not consistent in that way. The two accident reconstructionists were great. The last accident reconstructionist, Dr. Rentschler, the biomechanical engineer, testified that on cross, albeit, that the problem with this case is that there's just no evidence pointing to what happened to the victim. And at one point said there's basically infinite possibilities of how the victim could have fallen backwards and hit his head, because the back of the head injury with no injury elsewhere in the body except for the abrasions on the arm is not consistent with being struck by a vehicle. So a lot of things could have happened to cause him to fall backwards and hit his head on a hard surface. But what he didn't do is cause the brake to the tail light and hit the car. He said for the victim to have hit the car when the car was going over 15 miles an hour, because they tested it at 15, and at 15 miles an hour found significant damage would have been caused to a human body, and significant damage would have been caused to the car. He said if the victim's just the head hit the tail light, if he was, I don't know, going to bend down into the street as the car was coming backwards, that there would have been more damage to the vehicle given the vehicle's speed. And the reason they tested that theory is because there was no injury anywhere else on the body, indicating a vehicle collision. So did he say, could the vehicle have been backing up, causing the victim to get out of the way and slip and fall? Yes, it could have. A lot of things could have caused him to fall backwards. But again, the testimony is from the last three witnesses today, very clear testimony that the injuries to John O'Keefe are inconsistent with a vehicle strike to a pedestrian. And it was, I thought, very compelling testimony. And as to the ARCA experts, very neutral testimony. On cross-examination, Dr. Rentschler said very clearly, you can't deny the science and the physics. There's not enough evidence. And my notes to myself were Lally just wrecked himself. On cross-examination, Lally got into a lot more than the defense did on direct that was harmful to his case. But ultimately, the very last witness in a 30-day of testimony trial, 9 weeks of trial. And the last witness said, the problem with this case is there isn't enough evidence. There's infinite possibilities. Those injuries and that damage to the vehicle were not caused by the two colliding with each other. And you can't deny the science and the physics. That's what the jury was left with before closing arguments. I don't know how that gets much stronger for the defense. I think that's about as strong as it gets for a defense team. So at the end of the jury instruction conference, or the charging conference, we did learn a couple of things. We will hear much more of these instructions in their final form tomorrow. Remember, tomorrow is closing arguments, 2 hours. So the 2 hours are divided up in a strange way for me. The defense will do their closing argument first, and then the prosecution. It is not broken up into a closing argument, the defense argument, and rebuttal. It is just broken up into defense argument, prosecution argument. And that is how they are doing arguments. And then the judge will do the instructions. Then the alternates will be chosen. And then the 12 will be released to deliberate. I will be letting you know when the jury comes back via the LawNerd app. So the judge will be giving the instructions and sending the jury to deliberate, and then they will be deliberating as long as it takes them to deliberate. Charging conference this afternoon, we learned that there is not going to be a lesser included instruction for just a operating while intoxicated. The 3 charges will get their instructions, and then the jury will get a lesser included instruction for an involuntary manslaughter. Not all jurisdictions have involuntary manslaughter. Involuntary manslaughter is what Hannah Gutierrez, Reed, and Baldwin are dealing with. It is if you are doing something that you know is reckless, is sum and substance, but we will hear what that is in full tomorrow, because there are multiple prongs of that, and they were still finalizing which prongs of that instruction will be given. And then we will hear it when we get into jury instructions tomorrow. I know some people are like, jury instructions are boring and they just check out. It is the most important part of the case. And in that, it tells the jury how to decide. And I really hope that they will tell the jury how to decide. For deep dives into the stories that I covered here, you can find them on my YouTube channel at The Emily D. Baker and The Emily Show podcast. I stream every Tuesday and Thursday. The podcast goes live on Wednesdays. And if you want to stay in the loop with everything I'm doing, receive the fastest notifications out there, and get more Law Nerd community, join me at lawnerdapp.com, our free app for iOS and Android.